Aaron walked slowly through Central Park on that crisp Sunday morning, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his expensive trousers, his gaze lost among the towering elm trees that were just beginning to fill with fresh green leaves. He was 39 years old, the sole owner of a consulting firm in Manhattan that grew exponentially with each passing month, possessing properties in the most exclusive neighborhoods of New York City, and maintaining a bank account that could effortlessly solve any material problem that might arise. Yet, as he observed the bustling families strolling before him, the mothers pushing strollers along the paved paths, the fathers carrying their exhausted children on their shoulders, and young couples sharing a warm pretzel under the shade of the grand oaks, he felt a profound emptiness that no amount of professional success had ever managed to fill. He was a highly respected man in the ruthless corporate circles of the city, widely admired by peers and rivals alike for his uncanny ability to close utterly impossible deals. However, during the endlessly long nights in his luxurious penthouse overlooking the city skyline, when the silence of the massive rooms became almost deafening, he constantly asked himself for whom he was actually building this massive empire. He had dedicated every single hour of his adult life to raising his consulting business from the ground up, willingly sacrificing romantic relationships, meaningful friendships, and absolutely any possibility of ever forming a family of his own. His greedy business partner, Richard, constantly congratulated him on their soaring profits, and his competitors feared his strategic mind, but absolutely no one was waiting for him at home with a sincere, loving smile. That morning he had woken up in his vast, echoing apartment, feeling the heavy weight of isolation pressing down on his chest more intensely than ever before. He had drunk his morning coffee entirely alone while staring blankly at projected financial reports, eventually deciding to go out for a long walk because the suffocating loneliness between those four immaculate walls had simply become unbearable. The famous park was completely alive, overflowing with the pure, uninhibited laughter of children mixing harmoniously with the relaxed, joyful conversations of passing adults. There were energetic golden retrievers chasing after brightly colored tennis balls, and silver-haired grandparents sitting comfortably on wooden benches enthusiastically telling exaggerated stories to their wide-eyed grandchildren. Aaron eventually stopped in front of the magnificent Bethesda fountain, silently watching how the cascading water fell in perfect, endless circular ripples across the surface. For a fleeting moment, he saw his own life perfectly reflected in that endless repetitive motion, working intensely, earning massively, accumulating wealth endlessly, and returning to start all over again without a single real purpose to give any of it true meaning. He took a very deep breath, desperately trying to push away these dark, melancholic thoughts that had been visiting his mind with increasing frequency over the past few months, and continued walking aimlessly along the winding concrete paths. In the near distance, a lively group of neighborhood children was playing an improvised game of soccer on the grass, their loud shouts of pure excitement filling the crisp morning air with a vibrant energy that he had almost completely forgotten existed in the world. He walked past a small artisanal food stand where a young, affectionate couple was playfully arguing through soft giggles about which flavor of ice cream to share, and he felt a sharp, painful sting in his chest, realizing he had never experienced that kind of effortless complicity with anyone. His previous romantic relationships had always been exceptionally brief, largely superficial, and inevitably interrupted, either by his sheer obsession with corporate work or by his fundamental inability to connect truly and deeply with another human being. The sophisticated women he had briefly dated in the past were always actively looking for the highly successful entrepreneur, the polished man in the impeccable tailored suit, with the outrageously expensive watch on his wrist. Absolutely none of them had ever bothered to look past that shiny, wealthy facade to discover the profoundly lost man who felt completely adrift amidst the towering waves of his own financial success. Aaron finally sat down on a quiet wooden bench, positioned directly under a massive, beautiful oak tree, silently observing how a patient father was gently teaching his little daughter how to ride a small pink bicycle. The man held her very carefully, while she pedaled clumsily, both of them bursting into loud laughter every single time she wobbled and momentarily lost her fragile balance. That beautiful everyday scene provoked a strangely painful nostalgia inside him for something he had never actually possessed. A deep aching yearning for a completely different life that he had willingly let slip through his fingers while blindly chasing corporate goals that now seemed utterly hollow. He seriously wondered if he was still in time to build something completely different from scratch, if he could somehow stop being just the ruthless, unfeeling businessman and slowly transform into someone who truly deeply mattered in the daily life of another person. But those hopeful thoughts felt incredibly distant, almost entirely impossible, as if he had unknowingly crossed a dark point of no return many, many years ago in his relentless pursuit of wealth. He closed his eyes for a quiet moment, willingly letting the gentle morning sun warmly caress his face, and desperately tried to find just a little bit of fragile peace amidst the silent, raging storm that constantly inhabited his soul. When he finally opened his eyes once again, he immediately noticed a very small girl who was observing him with intense curiosity from just a few yards away, her dark braided pigtails moving softly and rhythmically with the passing morning breeze. She was gripping the bottom hem of her simple dress tightly with both of her small hands, looking exactly as if she were actively gathering all her inner courage for something incredibly important. Her large, expressive eyes shined with a fierce determination that contrasted dramatically and adorably with her remarkably tiny, fragile stature. Aaron instinctively smiled at her, without thinking much about it, adopting the gentle, non-threatening manner in which adults usually smile at unknown children, quietly hoping that this small, friendly gesture would be enough to send the little girl running safely back to her parents. But instead of turning around and walking away, the determined little girl took one brave step forward, and then another, approaching him with an adorable mixture of natural shyness and surprising bravery that he instantly found incredibly charming. He quickly looked around the immediate area, scanning the scattered crowds to find any adult who might be actively looking for her, but he saw absolutely no one paying any specific attention to the little girl, even though there were dozens of people scattered across the green lawn. The tiny girl finally stopped right in front of him, standing so incredibly close that Aaron could clearly count the small, adorable freckles that decorated her little nose, and notice her cheeks deeply flushed from having been running and playing moments before. She was wearing a very simple, modest dress that looked meticulously clean, but visibly worn out from time, the exact kind of garment that had been washed with immense care over and over again, while her black patent leather shoes shined brightly, as if someone had lovingly polished them that very same morning. There was something remarkably intense in her steady gaze that completely unsettled him, a strange, profound seriousness for someone so incredibly young, looking exactly as if she carried massive, heavy thoughts far too large for her tender age. Aaron felt a sudden, genuine wave of curiosity to know exactly what this little girl would do or say to him next, completely unaware of the monumental fact that the very next few seconds would drastically and permanently alter the entire course of his life forever. She tilted her small head slightly to one side, studying his face with the absolute, unfiltered intensity that only innocent children can possess when something genuinely catches their undivided interest. For a brief, magical moment, the loud, chaotic noise of the busy New York park seemed to completely fade away, the surrounding laughter and overlapping conversations turning into a distant, muffled murmur while Aaron and the little girl simply stared at each other in a heavy, highly meaningful silence. He honestly did not know what he was expecting to happen next, but he was most definitely not intellectually or emotionally prepared for the profound innocence of what was about to unfold right before him. The little girl took a very deep, dramatic breath, looking exactly as if she were about to ask the single most important question of her entire young existence. Aaron felt a strange, thrilling wave of anticipation rapidly run through his entire body. Never once imagining that the simple words of an unknown child could effortlessly pierce through the massive steel walls he had spent decades building tightly around his heart. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows casually on his knees, intentionally trying to lower himself to a much less intimidating physical height, so the small girl would feel completely safe talking to him. "Are you lost, little one?" he asked, with a surprisingly soft, gentle voice, naturally assuming that perhaps she had wandered off and desperately needed an adult's help to safely locate her missing parents among the massive weekend crowd. But the little girl immediately shook her head firmly side to side, her dark braids swinging wildly, and her youthful expression somehow becoming even more resolutely determined than it had been a moment ago. "No, mister," she replied with a surprisingly clear, firm voice that did not seem to match her tiny physical size at all. "I just really need to ask you something incredibly important." Aaron felt a spark of pure, genuine curiosity, for the first time in many long years, deeply wondering what in the world could be so critically important to a child of this age that she would boldly approach a complete stranger with such absolute gravity. He settled back slightly into the wooden bench, dedicating his complete and undivided attention to this mysterious little stranger who had so wonderfully interrupted his melancholic Sunday thoughts in the most unexpected manner possible. The cool morning breeze carried the sweet nostalgic scent of blooming park flowers, mixed perfectly with the irresistible aroma of roasted peanuts from a nearby vendor, while Aaron patiently watched the girl prepare herself. She squeezed the hem of her worn dress just a little bit tighter, a tiny nervous gesture that clearly revealed that despite her brave front, this mysterious mission was making her quite anxious. The seconds stretched out endlessly, as if time itself were actively holding its breath patiently, waiting for the exact moment the heavy words would finally tumble out of the little girl's mouth. The brave little girl finally opened her mouth to speak, and Aaron leaned in just a fraction closer, without even realizing it, acting exactly as if he were terribly afraid of missing a single syllable of her secret. "Mr." she began, with an absolutely adorable, heartbreaking solemnity that immediately captivated him. "I really need to know something before my mom sees me talking to you." Aaron nodded slowly, giving her silent but absolute permission to continue, completely intrigued by the bizarre direction this unusual conversation was taking. And then, with devastating, unvarnished innocence, the little girl asked the exact question that would seamlessly break Aaron's tightly guarded life completely in half. "Are you married?" Aaron blinked several times in rapid succession, desperately trying to process the completely unexpected words he had just heard, genuinely wondering if he had misunderstood her completely, or if his own ears were playing a very cruel trick on him. An involuntary, genuine smile quickly appeared on his handsome face, a complicated mixture of profound surprise and gentle amusement at the sheer audacity of the question he had just received from this tiny, unknown child. Never in his entire corporate, strictly regimented life had he experienced a moment so wonderfully direct and breathtakingly genuine as this exact instance, looking into eyes overflowing with pure, unadulterated hope. "No, little one." He finally answered, his deep voice coming out much softer and far more tender than his usual commanding boardroom tone. "No, I am not married." The little girl let out a breath so incredibly deep and profoundly relieved that Aaron simply could not help but laugh softly under his breath, feeling completely bewildered but irremediably captivated by the surreal scene unfolding before him. She tightly closed her eyes for a brief second, looking exactly as if she had just received the absolute best news of her entire life after waiting for an eternity. When she opened her eyes once again, they shined brightly, with a pure, unfiltered joy that caused a very strange, warm sensation to bloom rapidly right in the middle of Aaron's usually cold chest. He found himself smiling much more broadly than before, completely forgetting the heavy, suffocating melancholy he had been dragging around all morning, which was now entirely replaced by a genuine fascination for this extraordinary little creature. The girl gave a tiny, spontaneous jump of pure happiness, a gesture so full of vibrant life that Aaron felt as though a bright beam of sunlight had violently pierced into the darkest, most hidden corner of his soul. "May I politely ask why that is so very important to you?" Aaron asked gently, leaning even closer in her direction, genuinely and deeply interested in uncovering the intricate reasoning hiding behind such a highly peculiar question. The little girl nodded her head enthusiastically, clearly deeply relieved to finally be able to openly share the heavy burden she had apparently been guarding inside her small heart for quite some time. "It is just that at my school, Mr. Under the watch of my teacher, Miss Davis, absolutely all the other girls and boys have a daddy." She began to explain with that brutal, unfiltered honesty that only young children possess. Her heavy words fell upon Aaron like freezing drops of sudden winter rain, violently waking him up to a harsh, painful reality that he had never personally had to confront in his privileged adult life. She continued speaking rapidly, her tiny hands now wildly gesticulating to emphasize her important points, completely unaware of the massive emotional impact her innocent words were inflicting on the wealthy man sitting right in front of her. "When there are fun festivals at school, absolutely all the daddies arrive to help set up. They bring delicious things to eat, and they always play fun games with their kids." The little girl explained with a remarkably steady voice. "My mom always comes to every event, and she truly makes double the effort of anyone else. But I constantly look at the other girls laughing with their daddies, and I always wonder what that feels like," she confessed. Aaron instantly felt a thick, painful knot rapidly forming in his tight throat, a wave of raw emotion that he had successfully suppressed for decades, violently threatening to completely overflow from his eyes. The tiny girl looked at him with those enormous, heartbreakingly sincere eyes, willingly sharing her most profound secret pain with a total stranger, simply because she desperately needed someone in the world to finally understand her. "Late last night, my mom was talking to my Aunt Chloe on the telephone." The little girl continued lowering her small voice conspiratorially, as if she were sharing an incredibly critical state secret with him. "And I quietly listened from the hallway when she firmly said that she would never, ever get involved with a married man, because doing that goes entirely against absolutely everything she fiercely believes in." Aaron nodded very slowly, finally beginning to fully comprehend the surprising, complicated direction this deeply personal confession was inevitably heading toward. "My mom always says that willfully destroying another person's family is one of the absolute gravest sins you can commit, before God," the little girl explained, with a stunning level of seriousness that did not correspond to her young age at all. "She always says that marriage is incredibly sacred, and that she would absolutely never be the terrible reason why a wife would suffer crying, or why innocent children would tragically lose their loving father." Aaron immediately felt a profound, surging respect for this completely unknown mother, a woman who was very clearly raising her child with unshakable moral values and incredibly solid life principles despite their apparent struggles. The little girl bravely continued speaking with much more confidence now, looking precisely as if she had been tightly guarding these specific words for a very long time, and had finally found someone truly willing to listen to them. So, when I saw you sitting right here, looking so incredibly elegant and peaceful on the bench, I thought that maybe. She suddenly paused for a brief moment, nervously biting her lower lip in an adorable, timid gesture. I thought that if you were not married, maybe you could. Her small voice slowly trailed off into silence, looking as if she had just abruptly realized the massive weight of what she was daring to say out loud. Aaron vividly felt his own heart tightly compressing inside his chest, understanding with perfect agonizing clarity exactly what the brave little girl did not quite dare to say loudly to a complete stranger. This extraordinary little girl, armed only with her breathtaking innocence and surprising bravery, was actively searching for a father, and for some inexplicable magical reason, she had chosen him out of all the hundreds of people in the massive park. "What is your wonderful name, little one?" Aaron asked with a noticeably hoarse voice, the rising tide of powerful emotions dangerously threatening to completely break his long-maintained corporate composure. "My name is Iris," she replied with a beautifully timid smile that instantly illuminated her entire face like a burst of pure sunshine. "I am 6 years old, even though my mom always tells people that I think and talk exactly as if I were a 60-year-old woman." Aaron laughed softly at the charming comment, instantly visualizing Iris's hard-working mother saying those exact words with a complicated mixture of immense maternal pride and exhausting daily worry. "It is an absolute pleasure to meet you, Iris," he said warmly, extending his large hand in a highly formal, respectful manner. "My name is Aaron." She enthusiastically took his large hand with her tiny, fragile fingers, squeezing it with a highly surprising, solid firmness that genuinely impressed him. In that incredibly simple, innocent physical contact, Aaron undeniably felt something monumental and foundational violently shift deep within the core of his very being. "And exactly, where is your mother right now, Iris?" Aaron asked softly, casting his gaze around the vibrant, crowded park once again, actively searching for any distressed woman who might be frantically looking for her missing child. Iris vaguely pointed her small finger toward a shaded area further down the concrete path, where there were several isolated wooden benches, safely tucked under the large protective trees. "She is over there, resting, for just a little bit," the little girl carefully explained. "Sundays are her absolute only free day of the week, because she works exceptionally hard all week long sewing heavy clothes for other people in a tiny shop in Brooklyn." Aaron felt a sudden, sharp pang of an emotion he could not easily identify, a complex mixture of deep admiration and protective concern for this completely unknown woman making enormous sacrifices for her child. "Iris, I really need you to tell me the absolute truth," Aaron said with gentle seriousness, slowly crouching down until his eyes were perfectly level with the little girl's gaze. "Does your mother actually know that you are standing all the way over here, actively talking to me?" The tiny girl quickly shook her head side to side, nervously biting her lip once again. "No, mister, she does not know. But when I saw you, I felt a very strong feeling right here." She gently touched her tiny chest with her small hand. "It felt exactly like when my mom says that God purposely places important signs directly in our path." Their quiet, intensely private moment was suddenly violently shattered by the loud sound of frantic, desperate footsteps pounding heavily against the grass, and a panicked feminine voice screaming Iris's name at the top of her lungs. "Iris, where exactly are you?" The sheer, unadulterated urgency completely laced throughout that trembling voice, caused both Aaron and little Iris to quickly separate and spin around simultaneously toward the exact direction of the terrifying call. Just a few yards away, a remarkably beautiful but entirely terrified woman was sprinting directly toward them with an expression of absolute paralyzing terror prominently displayed across her pale face. She wore very simple, modest clothing, a plain cotton blouse, and a pair of blue jeans deeply faded from years of constant use, and her dark, messy hair flew wildly around her shoulders with every single frantic step she took. Her panicked eyes desperately searched through the scattered park crowds until they finally mercifully landed directly upon the small figure of her daughter. "Iris!" she screamed once again, her voice now breaking with a massive wave of relief, perfectly mixed with the kind of primal anxiety that only a devoted mother could ever possibly express. Aaron immediately stood up to his full imposing height, instantly realizing exactly how incredibly suspicious this entire scene must look to the deeply terrified mother running toward them. His expensive clothing, his towering height, standing extremely close to her tiny daughter, both of them sharing a very intense emotional moment with visible tears in their eyes. The frantic woman arrived running at full speed and practically ripped Iris away from his side, yanking the small girl tightly against her protective body in a fierce embrace, while glaring at Aaron with a fiery mixture of absolute fear and deep mistrust. "What exactly is going on here?" demanded the mother, whose name Aaron assumed was Lauren, her voice trembling violently but remaining fiercely protective as she deliberately positioned her body like a shield between Aaron and her tiny daughter. Aaron immediately raised both of his hands in a universal gesture of complete peace, entirely understanding the sheer suffocating terror that this poor mother had to be experiencing in that exact moment. "Madam, please, absolutely do not be frightened," he began to say with the calmest, most reassuring voice he could possibly muster. "Your daughter is completely safe and well. I would absolutely never ever do anything to harm her." But his soothing words seemed entirely insufficient against the deeply ingrained panic glaring clearly from the fiercely protective eyes of that beautiful trembling woman. Iris, perfectly sensing the rising dangerous tension between the two adults, forcefully wiggled out of her mother's tight embrace and grabbed her hand tightly. Looking up at her with that profound, serious expression Aaron now recognized perfectly well. "Mom, please wait. You have to let me explain," Iris pleaded with absolute urgency, gently tugging at her mother's trembling hand to forcibly capture her complete, undivided attention. Lauren looked down at her daughter, her chest still heaving heavily from the terrifying sprint, her beautiful face displaying a ghostly pallor that clearly revealed precisely how agonizingly terrified she had been just moments ago. "I walked all the way over to him on purpose." "Mom," Iris quickly confessed desperately, trying to de-escalate the situation. Lauren looked sharply back at Aaron, evaluating him cautiously with tired eyes that had obviously learned to be highly suspicious after years of independently raising a young girl in a massive, often dangerous city like New York. "Why in the world would you ever approach a complete stranger, Iris?" Lauren asked, her trembling voice now carrying a mixture of massive relief and strict maternal reprimand. "I have told you an absolute 1,000 times that we absolutely must never speak to people we do not intimately know." Iris lowered her gaze toward the grass for a brief moment, clearly feeling properly scolded by her mother. But then she lifted her small chin once again with incredible determination. "Mom, I just really had to ask him a very important question," the little girl stated firmly. Lauren deeply furrowed her brow, visibly confused, and still highly alert to any potential danger. "Ask him exactly what, my sweet love?" Lauren questioned, clearly baffled by her daughter's uncharacteristic behavior. Iris took a remarkably deep breath, and then, armed with that same devastating, brutal innocence she had displayed earlier, loudly and clearly answered, "I asked him if he was married, Mom." The incredibly dense silence that immediately followed her shocking declaration was so overwhelmingly thick that Aaron swore he could practically feel it pressing physically against his skin. Lauren remained completely frozen in place, like a beautiful statue, her large, expressive eyes widening to an impossible degree as her exhausted brain desperately tried to process the utterly humiliating words her tiny daughter had just announced to the world. Very slowly, agonizingly, so her horrified gaze shifted from Iris's innocent face directly up to Aaron's utterly bewildered expression. In that precise moment, deeply buried beneath the thick layers of lingering fear and maternal tension, Aaron clearly witnessed something else entirely, rapidly taking over Lauren's beautiful features, absolute soul-crushing embarrassment. Her entire face instantly transformed into a brilliant shade of crimson, an intensely hot blush rapidly climbing all the way from her delicate neck straight up to her cheeks, making her look exactly as if she fervently prayed the earth would violently split open and swallow her whole. "Iris!" Lauren gasped with a voice that was barely an audible whisper, sounding so profoundly mortified that Aaron actually felt a brief pang of genuine sympathy for her agonizing predicament. "You walked up and blatantly asked this strange man if he was married." The little girl nodded her head vigorously without displaying a single ounce of shame, completely and blissfully unaware of the monumental social catastrophe she had just orchestrated for her deeply traditional mother. "Yes, Mom, because late last night I clearly heard you firmly telling Aunt Chloe on the telephone that you would absolutely never involve yourself with a married man, because it violently goes against your deep faith and everything God expects from us." Lauren tightly closed her eyes, her shoulders sagging as she clearly wished she possessed a magical machine to travel back in time and permanently erase that specific telephone conversation. Aaron completely, despite the highly awkward tension suffocating the air, felt a genuine, irrepressible smile aggressively threatening to break across his lips at the sheer unvarnished honesty of this remarkable child. "And he clearly told me that he is absolutely not married, Mom." Iris continued with bright enthusiasm, still completely oblivious to the towering inferno of humiliation actively consuming her poor mother's soul. "So, I thought that maybe—" But Lauren instantly threw up a desperate hand, effectively cutting off her daughter's horrifying matchmaking attempts before she could utter another devastating word. "Iris, please absolutely stop talking right now," Lauren pleaded with a voice visibly strangled by pure mortification. She then slowly turned her burning face back toward Aaron, her beautiful eyes reflecting a messy combination of desperate apology and agonizing humiliation. "Sir, I honestly do not even know what to say to you. I offer you my absolute most sincere apologies." Lauren began, her voice shaking noticeably with every single syllable. "Please, you must understand that I would absolutely never ever instruct my young daughter to do something so wildly inappropriate. This was absolutely not my idea. I swear it before God." Aaron could clearly see the sheer desperation shining in her eyes, the urgent, desperate need for him to believe that she was not running some sort of elaborate manipulative scam to trap a wealthy Manhattan businessman in the park. "Madam, I beg you please do not apologize," Aaron said with an incredibly soft, deeply understanding voice. "I know with absolute certainty that this was entirely Iris's independent initiative. She explained absolutely everything to me very clearly." Lauren looked up at him with a cautious mixture of immense relief and burning curiosity, silently wondering exactly how many deeply private family secrets her daughter had casually shared. In absolute fact, Erin continued, offering a warm, reassuring smile, your wonderful daughter is easily one of the most utterly extraordinary human beings I have ever had the privilege of meeting in my entire life. Lauren blinked several times in rapid succession, genuinely surprised by the unprompted lavish compliment, her highly defensive physical posture finally relaxing just a fraction, though she firmly kept her daughter tucked safely against her side. Iris told me a lot about the two of you, about how you bravely raise her completely alone, about your grueling daily work as a talented seamstress. Erin explained intentionally, keeping his tone highly respectful and warm. And she also told me very clearly exactly how incredibly much she loves and admires you. Erin added gently. Lauren looked down at her precious daughter with eyes overflowing with boundless love, perfectly mixed with lingering concern over what else had been revealed. She also told me, Erin continued with extreme care, about her very deep desire to have a real father, and about how amazing you are, but how she sometimes feels very different from all the other lucky children at her school. Those heavy words seemed to strike Lauren like a physical blow, her eyes instantly filling with thick, heavy tears that she fought bravely but unsuccessfully to contain. Madam, Erin said gently, taking a very small, non-threatening step forward, I am absolutely not telling you all of this to make you feel bad. On the absolute contrary, I desperately want you to know that the beautiful way your daughter speaks of you proves you have done an utterly extraordinary job raising her. Lauren quickly wiped away a stubborn tear that threatened to fall, nodding silently but still entirely unwilling to trust her trembling voice to speak. But, Mom, Iris suddenly intervened, tugging eagerly at her mother's hand once again. He is also completely alone in the world, exactly just like we are. Lauren looked down at her daughter with profound confusion before slowly turning her bewildered attention back toward the tall, elegantly dressed man standing before them. Erin nodded very slowly, making a rapid internal decision that after absolutely everything young Iris had bravely shared with him, the absolute least he could do was to be equally vulnerable and honest with her mother. It is completely true, Erin finally admitted, his deep voice carrying a heavy vulnerability he had not allowed anyone to hear in decades. I am 39 years old. I own a highly successful consulting firm. Materially speaking, I possess far more than I could ever possibly need, but emotionally. He paused for a brief moment, desperately searching for the exact right words to convey his inner reality without scaring her away. Emotionally, I am completely and utterly empty. Lauren looked at him, her beautiful eyes slowly beginning to show genuine human understanding, instead of just pure defensive suspicion. I have spent my entire adult life meticulously building a massive corporate empire, Erin continued softly, willingly sacrificing meaningful relationships, building a family, and absolutely any real possibility of having an authentic personal life. And this morning, I came to this park simply because I could no longer bear sitting completely alone in my massive, empty apartment. Lauren remained entirely silent, listening to his unexpected confession with absolute, undivided attention. Then, your wonderful daughter bravely approached me, Erin said, a soft, genuine smile breaking across his face, and she boldly asked me that incredibly direct question that absolutely no adult would ever dare to ask me. And in the very brief minutes I spent talking with Iris, I honestly felt far more genuine human connection than I have felt in the last 10 years of my entire life. Lauren looked down at Iris, and then back up at Erin, clearly trying to mentally process the sheer magnitude of everything she was hearing. "Madam," Aaron said, taking another tiny step forward, but deliberately maintaining a highly respectful physical distance between them. "I completely understand if you wish to take your daughter right now and walk far away from me forever. I am a total stranger to you, and you have every single right in the world to aggressively protect Iris." Lauren nodded very slightly, clearly appreciating the fact that he completely recognized and validated her maternal protective instincts. "But before you decide to walk away," Aaron added with sudden fierce desperation, "I really need you to know that this brief conversation with your daughter has fundamentally changed something deep inside me." He looked directly into Lauren's tear-filled eyes. "It made me painfully realize that I have been living a completely hollow life, and that maybe, just maybe, I am still in time to build something wonderfully real, something that actually matters in this world." He clasped his large hands together nervously. "And if you desperately need time, I will gladly give you all the time in the world. If you need us to move incredibly slowly, we will move as slowly as you wish. But please, Lauren, I am begging you, do not ask me to simply walk away, because permanently losing you and Iris today would mean losing the absolute only thing that has ever given my life any true meaning." Lauren stared at him for a remarkably long moment, her expressive face perfectly reflecting the intense internal battle she was fighting between the heavy walls of fear that had kept her safe for years and the fragile, beautiful hope for something wonderfully better that Aaron was bravely offering her. In the weeks that miraculously followed that fateful Sunday afternoon, Aaron completely restructured his entire existence, happily ignoring the loud complaints of his business partner Richard, to ensure his weekends were entirely dedicated to Lauren and Iris. Every single Sunday, he arrived at Central Park holding sweet treats from Mr. Henderson's cart, spending countless hours talking deeply with Lauren under the oak trees, patiently teaching Iris how to fly a colorful kite, and slowly proving his steadfast dedication. Eventually, the magical day arrived when Aaron patiently taught Iris how to ride her new pink bicycle, running tirelessly alongside her until she miraculously found her balance and pedaled entirely on her own. When Iris jumped into his waiting arms and joyfully declared that he had taught her exactly like a real dad would, the heavy weight of those beautiful words pushed Lauren into a terrifying panic, forcing her to confront her deepest fears of abandonment. But Aaron firmly stood his ground, delivering a passionate, tear-filled declaration of his unconditional love for both of them, promising to always be there for the school runs, the homework, and the quiet nights. Lauren finally broke down tearfully, confessing her own deep love for him, and they embraced tightly a beautiful new family, born not of blood, but of a deeply intentional choice. True family is not merely born of blood, but forged through intentional love, patience, and the courage to open a wounded heart. Life frequently teaches us that our most profound wealth is never found in bank accounts or corporate titles, but in the quiet moments of connection with those who truly see us. As we age, we come to understand that the walls we build to protect ourselves from pain often end up locking out the very joy we desperately seek. It is incredibly daunting to trust again after enduring deep disappointments. Yet taking that leap of faith is the only way to discover genuine redemption. Second chances are rarely announced with grand fanfare. They usually arrive in the simple, unassuming guise of a child's innocent question or a shared afternoon in a public park. Embracing vulnerability does not equate to weakness. Rather, it is the ultimate testament to human strength. Ultimately, the greatest legacy one can leave behind is not a towering empire of wealth, but a steadfast legacy of love, proving that it is never too late to rewrite your story and find exactly where you belong.